To force me to give her a grandchild, my mother convinced my girlfriend I was ready for a baby. When I resisted, she and a therapist tried to prove I was mentally unstable. My girlfriend just told me she's pregnant, and as she held up the positive test with a trembling, hopeful hand, I saw my mother and sister smiling behind her, holding a world's best grandpa coffee mug they must have bought weeks ago. In that single, horrifying instant, I knew this wasn't a happy accident or a miracle of love. It was a carefully planned ambush, and I was the target. My life, the one I had meticulously built to escape my family's suffocating expectations, was over. I had just been drafted into a war for my own future, and the enemy was my own blood. To understand the depth of this betrayal, you have to understand my mother, Patricia. To her neighbors and friends, she was a charismatic matriarch, the proud mother of 2 successful children. But in private, she was a puppeteer, and her obsession wasn't with babies, but with the continuation of the family name, Gonzalez. My name. The pressure started when I was a boy. While other kids were playing video games, I was getting lectures on legacy, on my duty as the only son to carry our bloodline into the next generation. My father, before he passed, had been a quiet man, constantly overshadowed by her ambition. After he was gone, that ambition focused on me like a laser. While I was being groomed to be the patriarch, my older sister, Beth, became the perfect example. She married her high school sweetheart, Mark, by the age of 22. My mother threw them a lavish wedding that felt less like a celebration of love and more like a corporate merger designed to produce heirs. And produce them Beth did. 3 kids in 5 years. Each pregnancy announcement was a citywide event. My mother would parade Beth and her perfect, growing family around like trophies, constantly telling me, "See, Alex? That's what a real family looks like. That's a woman who understands her purpose. That's a man who knows his duty." Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could to build a different kind of life. I became an architect, pouring my passion into creating clean, orderly spaces, the exact opposite of my chaotic family life. I met Chloe, a brilliant, funny, and ambitious graphic designer who, like me, wanted to focus on her career and maybe, just maybe, think about kids far down the road. We were happy. We were building something real, on our own terms. But to my mother, my life was a profound disappointment. All that potential wasted on blueprints and models, she'd sigh dramatically during our mandatory Sunday dinners. "Your sister has given me 3 beautiful grandchildren, securing the family name. You're letting the Gonzalez legacy wither and die for what?" A corner office. I learned to manage her, to play a strategic game of placation. I talked vaguely about the future and how Chloe and I were getting serious. I let her believe that a white picket fence and 5 kids were on my vision board, when in reality, my vision was of a life free from her suffocating control. I thought I had it handled. I thought I was smarter than her manipulations. That was my fatal mistake. The ambush was staged at Beth and Mark's 10th anniversary party. The whole family was there, a perfect picture of domestic bliss. My mother was glowing, making a grand speech about the importance of family. Then she called for a special toast. That's when Chloe, her face a mixture of terror and excitement, stood up. She couldn't even speak the words. She just held up the little white stick with its 2 pink lines. The room erupted. Beth squealed and hugged Chloe. My mother burst into performative, joyful tears. Mark slapped me on the back, congratulating me. And through it all, I was frozen, my mind reeling. Chloe and I had been careful. We used protection. We had talked about this, about waiting. It didn't make sense. Then I saw it. The pre-purchased mug in my sister's hand. The knowing, triumphant look in my mother's eyes. She caught my gaze from across the room and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if to say, checkmate. Later that night, the fog of shock began to clear, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I asked Chloe how this could have happened. "I don't know, Alex," she whispered, her own joy now tinged with my obvious panic. "But your mom, she said something a few weeks ago. She said she knew you secretly wanted this, that you were just scared to tell me because you thought it would derail my career. She said you felt pressured to be the cool, career-focused couple, but that your heart ached for a family." My mother had been playing a separate game with Chloe all along, whispering poison in her ear, framing my desire for freedom as a fear of fatherhood. She hadn't just ambushed me. She had turned the woman I loved into her unwilling accomplice. I was trapped not by a positive pregnancy test, but by a web of manipulation so intricate and so devious. The days following the announcement felt like living in a nightmare someone else was directing. My own home, once a sanctuary, became the stage for my mother's grand production. She was over constantly, bringing books on fatherhood, swatches for a nursery, and endless, unsolicited advice. Every attempt I made to speak with Chloe alone was thwarted. My mother or sister would conveniently show up, bearing gifts or offering to cook dinner, creating a buffer of forced celebration that made any real conversation impossible. The air was thick with a joy that felt utterly suffocating. My first real attempt to fight back was a disaster. I finally managed to get Chloe out of the house for dinner, just the two of us. "Chloe, we need to talk about this," I began, my voice low. "This wasn't our plan. You know that." Chloe's face, which had been so full of love and hope just days before, clouded over with defensiveness. "What are you saying, Alex? That you're not happy?" "I'm saying this was a surprise, and I think my mother has been manipulating us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Manipulating us?" she scoffed, pulling her hand away. "She's been supportive. She told me how you get quiet whenever you see Beth's kids because you want your own so badly. She said you were worried I would choose my career over you, over us. She was just trying to help me understand you, Alex. Why does it feel like you're attacking the one person who is thrilled for us?" My mother hadn't just laid a trap. She had armed it with Chloe's own insecurities and my pre-packaged, fabricated desires. Every argument I made sounded like I was confirming the very fears my mother had planted in Chloe's mind. That I was scared, that I was trying to back out, that I was selfish. Our conversation ended in a tense, miserable silence. I had tried to expose the puppeteer and ended up looking like the villain. Have you ever tried to explain a conspiracy to someone who has been convinced it's a love story? It's impossible. You just sound insane. The next escalation was financial. For years, my mother had helped me with my finances. She was a whiz with numbers, and she'd framed it as a loving favor, helping her busy son manage his investments. I trusted her. I had given her limited access to my accounts to help with taxes and bill payments. One evening, unable to sleep, I logged into my online banking portal to get a clear picture of my savings. I was planning to show Chloe we needed to be financially prepared, hoping to use logic where emotion had failed. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, large sums of money had been systematically moved from my personal savings account into a new investment account I didn't recognize. The account name was the Gonzalez Family Trust. When I clicked for details, I saw the account holders, Patricia Gonzalez and Alex Gonzalez. She had used her limited access to forge my consent on a joint trust account and had been siphoning my money into it, walling off my own capital for the baby's future. I was being financially neutered, my resources redirected to fund a life I hadn't chosen. The next morning, I called our family lawyer, a man who had handled my father's will and our house closings. I thought he would be an ally. I was wrong. "Alex, my boy, your mother called me yesterday," he said, his voice oozing with paternalistic concern. "She's worried about you. She said the news of the baby, while wonderful, has sent you into a bit of a panic. She told me you might be calling, that you might have some paranoid ideas. She set up that trust to protect your assets for your child, son. It's a smart, responsible move." He recommended I take a few weeks to let the good news sink in. He wouldn't even discuss the legality of the fund transfers. My mother had anticipated my every move. She had inoculated my girlfriend, my lawyer, and my entire family against the truth. I was standing in the middle of my life, screaming that the house was on fire, and everyone I knew was smiling, telling me how much they loved the warmth. The walls weren't just closing in, they were made of my own money, and my mother was holding the mortgage. Trapped and cornered, my mind kept flashing back to my father. He was a quiet man, an engineer who found solace in the clear, unchangeable laws of physics. He was the calm center to my mother's chaotic ambition. I remember one Saturday afternoon when I was about 15. I was stressed about a big football game, and my mother was already planning a victory party, talking about college scouts. The pressure was immense. My dad found me in the garage, endlessly organizing his tools. He didn't say much at first, just handed me a wrench. We spent an hour silently cleaning and oiling his equipment. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes serious. "Alex," he said, his voice low, "your mother loves you, but her love is loud. Don't ever let her dreams get so loud in your head that you can't hear your own. Be your own man. It's the hardest job you'll ever have." He died 2 years later, and that memory became a sacred text, a guidepost for the life I was trying to build. The irony was crushing. The very thing he had warned me about had come to pass. Her dreams weren't just loud, they were a deafening roar, and my own voice was just a whisper in the storm. The transition from that quiet, sacred memory in the garage to my current crisis was dizzying. Suddenly, my perfectly designed apartment felt like a cage, every surface reflecting my powerlessness. I wanted to run, to escape, but my feet felt bolted to the floor, paralyzed by the complexity of the trap she had set. The breaking point came when my mother announced she was calling a family intervention. She framed it as an act of love, a way to help Alex cope with his cold feet and embrace his role as a father. She told Chloe it was necessary to save our relationship. I knew it was a show trial where my guilt was predetermined. I walked into my sister Beth's house, the designated location, feeling like a prisoner being led to the gallows. The whole family was there, their faces a mixture of pity and accusation. And sitting next to my mother, holding a clipboard, was Dr. Evans, a family therapist who had been friends with my mother since before I was born. The intervention began, and it was a masterclass in psychological warfare. "Alex," my mother started, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "we are all so worried about you. This should be the happiest time of your life, and you're pushing everyone away." My sister Beth chimed in, talking about how Mark had been nervous too, but how he manned up and embraced his duty. Then, Dr. Evans took over. It wasn't therapy, it was an indictment. He spoke in clinical, damning terms. "Alex, your behavior exhibits classic signs of avoidant personality disorder and a pathological fear of intimacy, likely stemming from an unresolved grief complex," he diagnosed, scribbling notes. "You've built a life of sterile, emotionless order. Your career in architecture is a clear manifestation of this, to avoid the messy, beautiful reality of human connection. Every protest I made was twisted into a symptom. My desire for financial independence was a control issue. My attempts to speak privately with Chloe were an effort to isolate her from her support system." He recommended that, for the good of the baby and my relationship with Chloe, I should temporarily move back into my childhood home, to re-immerse myself in a healthy family dynamic and confront my fears. Chloe, her eyes filled with tears, looked at me and pleaded, "Maybe he's right, Alex. Maybe we need this." They were offering me a straitjacket and calling it a loving embrace. I refused, of course. I stood up and told them I wouldn't be participating in this charade. I left, my heart pounding, and drove back to my apartment, the one place I still thought of as my own. I walked in and found my mother and Chloe in the living room, unpacking a box of maternity clothes. My mother was showing Chloe where the nursery could go. "I let her in, Alex," Chloe said quietly. "I thought, if you saw us getting ready, you'd feel more a part of it." My mother held up a tiny pair of sneakers. "She'll need a key, of course," Patricia said to Chloe, completely ignoring me. "For when she needs to pop in, or for when the baby comes." My mother smiled at me then, a cold, victorious smile. She hadn't just invaded my life. She had seized my territory and given the keys to her new ally. Life inside the siege was a slow, grinding form of torture. My mother had effectively moved into my life, a smiling warden ensuring my compliance. She and Chloe were a constant, chattering presence in my apartment, which now felt like a shared embassy in a hostile country. They painted a feature wall in the spare bedroom a pale, gender-neutral yellow. They assembled a crib, my architectural tools ironically used to build the bars of my new prison. Every day was filled with the sounds of their planning, a cheerful soundtrack to my own psychic breakdown. I was being erased from my own life, one baby-themed purchase at a time. Chloe was lost to me. She was caught in my mother's gravitational pull, believing that every controlling move was an act of love for her and the baby. My attempts to reason with her were now met with tired sighs. "Alex, please don't ruin this. Your mother is just excited." She saw a doting grandmother. I saw a master strategist. She saw a supportive family. I saw a cult. We were living in the same space, but in two completely different realities. My mother had driven a wedge between us so deep that I wasn't sure we could ever find our way back to each other. Fighting back directly had failed. Arguing made me the villain. Logic made me sound cold and unfeeling. I was losing. So, I made a desperate, calculated decision. If I couldn't fight them, I would join them. It was a Trojan horse strategy. The only way to get close to Chloe again, to get her away from my mother's constant influence, was to pretend to surrender. My new performance began the next morning. I walked into the living room where they were looking at ultrasound clinics and said, "You know, I was thinking about names last night." The effect was instantaneous. My mother's eyes lit up. Chloe looked at me with a cautious, hopeful smile. Really? She asked. Yeah, I said, forcing a casual tone. If it's a boy, maybe we could name him after my dad. It was the perfect move. It was sentimental, respectful of the family legacy, and utterly disarming. That day, I went with him to buy a stroller. I offered opinions. I put my hand on Chloe's belly. I played the part of the once scared, now reformed father-to-be. It was nauseating. Every smile felt like a lie, every supportive word a betrayal of myself. But I could see the tension in Chloe's shoulders begin to relax. She started looking at me again, not as a problem to be solved, but as her partner. I was slowly winning her back, one painful concession at a time. My secret mission was to find proof, something undeniable that would break my mother's spell over Chloe. My chance came during a family dinner at my sister Beth's house. While everyone was cooing over her youngest, I made an excuse to go up to her home office to take a work call. Her office was also a storage room for old memories. In a box in the back of her closet, I found what I was looking for: her old high school and college diaries. I felt like a traitor, but I was desperate. I flipped through the pages, and my blood ran cold. It was all there, a blueprint for my own nightmare. Entries from when she and Mark were first engaged. Mom told Mark today that I'm secretly ready for a baby, but that I'm scared to give up my freedom. She's trying to convince him to, get me pregnant. He thinks it's a great idea. Doesn't he see how manipulative this is? Another entry from a few years later. Mom set up a family trust for us without asking. She says it's for the kid's future, but it feels like she's trapping Mark, making sure he can never leave. It was a pattern, a playbook she had run on her own daughter years ago. Beth hadn't been the willing golden child, she had been the first victim, one who had eventually surrendered and accepted her fate. I snapped photos of the pages with my phone. This was it. This was the proof. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about excitement. It was a cold, calculated system of control, and I was holding the evidence in my hand. Now, I just needed to find the right moment to show it to Chloe, to detonate the bomb that would either save us or blow us apart for good. My opportunity came a week later. I manufactured a reason for us to get away, just the two of us. I told everyone I wanted to take Chloe on a surprise baby moon, a last romantic trip before the baby arrived. My mother, seeing this as the final proof of my capitulation, was ecstatic. She helped me plan it, suggesting a quaint bed and breakfast a few hours up the coast, a place she could recommend, of course. It was perfect, a neutral location, miles away from her suffocating influence. The entire drive there, I felt a tremor of anxiety, the knowledge that everything depended on the next few hours. That evening, sitting in front of a fireplace in our cozy, isolated room, I took a deep breath and laid my cards on the table. I didn't start with accusations. I started with us. Chloe, I said, taking her hands. I love you, and I know I've been difficult and distant, and I am sorry for that. But I need you to listen to me, really listen, without any other voices in the room. She was hesitant, but she nodded. I pulled out my phone. I showed her the bank statements, the systematic transfer of my life savings into a trust my mother controlled. I explained how the family lawyer had been prepped to dismiss my concerns. Her face paled. Then, I showed her the photos of her diary entries. This isn't my sister's diary, I said gently. This is Beth's, from 15 years ago. Chloe read the frantic, girlish script describing the same manipulations, the same lies, the same financial traps. She saw my mother telling Beth's husband that Beth was secretly ready for a baby. She saw the creation of a family trust to ensure her husband was locked in. It was our story, written in another woman's hand, a decade and a half earlier. The color drained from her face. The spell wasn't just broken, it was shattered. The look in her eyes wasn't anger at me, but pure, dawning horror at the realization that her pregnancy, this profound and personal experience, had been a strategic move in a lifelong game of chess she never even knew she was playing. She told me you'd try to manipulate me, Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face. She said you would lie to get out of it. But this is proof. We returned from that trip as a united front. The following Sunday, we walked into my mother's house together. Mom, we need to talk, I said, my voice calm and firm. Chloe stood beside me, her hand in mine. We know what you did, I continued. We know you manipulated Chloe. We know you stole my money. And we know this is a pattern of behavior you have used to control this family for decades. The denial was instant and ferocious, but for the first time, it had no power. "We are moving," Chloe said, her voice shaking but strong. "Alex has accepted a job with a firm in Oregon. We are leaving at the end of the month. And when our child is born," I added, delivering the final blow, "you will not be allowed to see him or her without one of us present. There will be no unsupervised visits. Ever. These are our boundaries. They are not negotiable." My mother stared at us, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. For the first time in my life, I had taken control. She had lost her grip. Months later, we were in our new home in Portland, 1,000 miles away from her influence. I was holding my son, Daniel, named after my father. The circumstances of his conception were a scar on my heart, but my love for him was pure and overwhelming. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister, Beth. I hadn't spoken to her much since the confrontation. Mom tried to get me to co-sign on a loan for Mark's business to keep him secure. I told her no. For the first time, it felt good. I looked down at my son, sleeping peacefully in my arms. The war wasn't over. With a mother like mine, it never truly would be. But we had won the most important battle. We had broken the cycle. We had escaped. And for the first time, the name Gonzalez didn't feel like a burden or a legacy to uphold. It just felt like my son's name, and it was mine to protect.